What's up, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Cinema Wave Podcast. We are back to talk to you guys about one of the biggest, newest movies in theaters right now. It is called The Bikeriders, starring Jodie Comer, Austin Butler, and Tom Hardy, written and directed by Jeff Nichols. I am one of your hosts. My name is Darian Scalamoni. I am joined on this episode by Zach Miller.
What's going on, guys?
As well as Vinny Albano.
Hello, hello.
So let's dive in. This movie came out, as of our recording, this movie came out the previous Friday. I believe the release date was June 21st. This is a movie that was pushed. So initially, this movie was supposed to release around award season 2023. I believe it was TIFF that it was supposed to play at, I think, last September. And that was supposed to be the world premiere. I think the wide release was supposed to be October. They decided to push it back. But this was one that I know, at least Zach, you and I were highly anticipating this movie. Vinny, I know you were excited about it as well. That's why you're on the review. But we'll start with you, Zach. Just broad, non-spoiler thoughts. What were your first thoughts on the Bikeriders?
So yeah, this was this was probably in my most anticipated for the year, just because I really like the period and I like the authenticity that they did with replicating the grittiness of the time period. I thought that the film does a really good job at immersing you in that world through the costumes and the makeup specifically. I think that's probably the best stuff of the movie in my opinion. And then I think here's the thing. I like the movie as a whole. I just felt that there were parts of the narrative that I wanted a little bit more from, or I wanted a little bit more progression and like gang on gang or bikers versus police or the true rebellious side as a whole unit, or the gang turning from a boys club into a chaotic mess, a little bit more of that transition. But I still liked the movie. I thought that they did a very good job. Jodie Comer is also my favorite part of the movie. But Vinny, what did you think?
Yeah, I agree for the most part. One, Jodie Comer is the glue that holds this film together. Not only her performance but her character as well. It's told in a very I couldn't stop comparing it to Goodfellas, the story structure, and it just kind of felt like Goodfellas with bikes and in the Midwest, even to some of the filmmaking techniques like the opening title card. But Jodie Comer was my favorite part, and possibly Oscar nom. I don't know. I really loved her in this. I really enjoyed just how she plays a narrator in this film. Moving on from that, the film was just very entertaining. I really enjoyed my time. I thought it was very fun. I think that in a similar boat, had me wishing more in terms of some of the biker club kind of activities. Kind of wanted to see more out of some characters. Don't overstay their welcome, but I loved Norman Reedus in this. I almost wanted a little bit more of him.
Yeah.
Even Mike Faust, is that how you say his name?
Faist.
Yeah. Faist. Loved him in Challengers. Really enjoyed his small part in this. Super excited to see more projects from him. But yeah, overall very enjoyable, a great period piece. And I think we'll go more in depth into this, but I think the biggest flaw for me, the biggest thing was I was wishing for more meat on Austin's character, Benny, which I want to go more in depth, but that's my overall thoughts.
I want to kind of go off what both of you guys said. I really enjoyed this movie. I agree with what Vinny just said. I do think that, at least in terms of what I've seen so far this year, I would definitely put Jodie Comer in the Oscar conversation, at least for a nomination for me in this film. I think she's really, really superb in it. And I've never seen Jodie Comer in anything before this. I know I'm probably in the minority because she's been kind of on the rise ever since Killing Eve, but really loved her in this. I do agree that there are moments where it feels like you could get a little bit more out of certain characters. I do at the same time, though, think that Jeff Nichols was so much trying to highlight the motorcycle club as a whole. And there's a lot of characters in this film. It's truly an ensemble, even though you have the three leads. You're getting enough on each character to still make you feel something for them. Like even Emery Cohen as Cockroach, like you
Yeah.
get a lot with his character. Like Michael Shannon as Zipko, who's Jeff Nichols' muse. He's been in every single one of his movies. Like, so you're getting something with all these different characters. The Butler comment I do agree with because he's kind of frontlined in the marketing as being the main person, and I do agree with the Goodfellas comparison too. Like I would consider this Goodfellas light. Like that's it's not to the same level as Goodfellas. Like to me,
Yeah.
Goodfellas is like a 10 as a
Oh, yeah,
movie.
that's a masterpiece.
I agree. I don't think the Bikeriders reaches that level, but I also really enjoy Jeff Nichols as a storyteller. Mud, I know you really like Mud as well, right,
Oh,
Zach?
yeah.
Yeah, Mud's a fantastic movie that he did.
Mhm.
I just saw Take Shelter for the first time this year and love that movie.
Mm.
So I like him as a storyteller. I like him as a writer and a director. And this is something that has been a passion project of his for a very long time. So to me, you could see that passion sort of ring through. But I don't, it's not a perfect movie, but
Yeah.
I do think that it was one of the more enjoyable movies of the year. And I love Tom Hardy in this film too. And Boyd Holbrook was another standout for me as Cal. Damon Harriman as Brucey, like, just every time I see this guy and everything, he's like one of those character actors now that just stands out, and I'm like, this dude is so good in everything he's in.
Yeah.
So acting wise, I think it's really high level for the most part, except for just some. And I don't even know if it's necessarily an Austin Butler thing. I don't think it is. I think it's more so that the way they decided to sort of do the narrative of it, that his character doesn't have a fully, even though he's projected in the marketing as the lead of the movie, he's not.
Yeah.
Really, like I would say Johnny and Kathy get a lot more meat on the bone, like you guys were saying, than he kind of gets. I don't know. If
I was trying to identify as well because I, even in the first 20, 30 minutes of the movie, he is a man of very few words, like Austin Butler. So what I was trying to understand was he was kind of this like archetype of the aesthetic of like the pretty boy biker who is the rebel teen. Like there were even points I double taked. I was like, he looks a lot like James Dean.
I thought
in
the
these
same exact
images.
thing.
Yeah. So especially with his haircut and then just the rebel without a cause demeanor. And then they also reference Brando's the wild one.
For Johnny's influence on the
for
biker
Johnny's
gang.
influence. But I also felt like the Brando like composure was more in Butler than Hardy with it. Hardy just seemed like a very hard shell, like seasoned dude. Like he even talks about being a teamster and like how he was a truck driver just with his experience. And he seems very like he seems more realistic as a townsperson than Butler does. Butler is like this raging stallion that nobody can tie down. So he's always trying to be like the road is his freedom, like that kind of style of filmmaking and character. But yeah, Vinny, what did you think?
Yeah, I agree with that. For me, however, like I was just wishing for a little bit more from Butler's character, especially since like the narrative it's told through the perspective of Kathy for the most part. But it's Kathy narrating Benny's story. You know, we start with Benny and we end with Benny. So the character of Benny, he is stoic and, you know, he's man of little words. And that's completely fine. It's great to have, you know, like a badass, you know, pretty boy stoic character. But at times it felt that he was just kind of on screen just to be pretty, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Because, you know, we clearly see through his stoic demeanor multiple times in the film that he clearly has this desperate love and desperate need to be a part of something, right? To be a part of the biker gang. And with that comes his love for his friends, even though he doesn't outwardly express it in a typical manner. But it's definitely there. We see that one of the few times Kathy was like, you know, the first time Kathy narrates how the first time she ever saw him come close to crying was when, you know, he injured his foot and he might have never been able to ride again. However, why? You know what I mean? Like I wanted a little bit more of like, why does he feel that way? You don't need to tell Benny's whole childhood story. You know, we don't need to like start from day one. I just wanted a little bit more on why does he feel so connected? Like, why does he so desperately want to be so with the biker club and whatnot? Like, I was just wishing for a little bit more because we spend so much time with him that, like, why is he so stoic other than being just like the badass?
Yeah, I do think Nichols' take, based on a little bit that I did see in some interviews and things too, like he wanted to have that mystique and that machismo with Benny's character in particular, and you kind of see it even in the intro. Like the first shot we get of him from Kathy's perspective is him leaning over the pool table, like perfectly lit, like toned, like muscle man, like. And Jeff Nichols, I saw in one of his interview Q&As when they had asked him why he cast him, he goes, I met this guy and he called me Mr. Nichols. He's like, which was so weird, just to start there. He goes, but he was the most attractive person I've ever seen in my entire life. And I was like, dude, like as I'm watching the screen though too, and like Zach said, I felt the exact same way. Like to me, I was like looking at James Dean, like in the flesh, in modern time. And I felt the same way. I was like, this dude is so fucking good looking. And like seriously, because he's a very handsome dude. And I do think, and I had seen somewhere else too online, that Nichols described this film as an unconventional love triangle, with the sense of like Kathy always wanting the love from Benny and Johnny always like loving him,
the club, and
like for the attraction that he had to how much dedication he had to the club, because that's what meant so much to Johnny. And you do see that in backstory, whether it's him watching The Wild One and even the references to like Easy Rider and things like that. Like you see that. So I can understand why you'd want to see a little bit more from his character, especially because so much of the story revolves around him, even though the story is being told through Kathy's eyes.
I wanted to see it too because, you know, he's kind of being fed as, I mean, Jodie's the narrator, but Austin is almost the hero or the anti-hero. So he has to make a choice between Jodie and the club several times in the film. So I did want to see that, like, which one does he love more and why, like explanation, and why did he choose the club over her several times, and then most especially towards the end, he kind of like chooses these different paths, and he rids himself of emotional relationship and just wants to bond and have this sense of freedom with a club, but no like responsibility too.
Yeah.
So I think that was like why, because if he's our main guy that we're following for most of the time and Jodie's trying to decipher his head the whole film, I wanted a little bit more of closure, I guess, on just that. But then, you know, I also thought that like he I don't know, that's how I'll come back with
yeah I do but I can totally understand that criticism too, though I do think like the plot can be thin at times, especially in regard to his character. But I do think so much of what he was going for was that fly on the wall feel of making you feel like you're immersed in that time period, which I do think he does a really good job of. Like you really feel like you're along, no pun intended, but you're along for the ride with these guys. Like you're really seeing the camaraderie and the community that is so important to all of them until it gets to a breaking point, which I do think is interesting too when they introduced Toby Wallace's character, who's just credited as the kid. Not going to spoil that for the people who haven't seen the movie yet until we go into like spoilers, but I think he represents the Benny that is the not even like, I mean, they're both kind of wild, violent people and they have these warrior spirits about them, but he's on one end of the spectrum where Benny's on the other end of the spectrum, where he even says like, in a time in the movie where Johnny is basically like, I mean, Johnny's the like you said, the vet of the club. And he's like, at some point I'm going to need to pass this over to somebody. And he's like, I don't want that responsibility. And then on the other end, there's a kid that comes in that just wants all of it. So much so that he's willing to leave his friends in that scene that you see later on in the film. So I do think it's interesting to have that sort of opposite sides of the spectrum also playing along with the plot. But let's talk about Jodie Comer's character, because as Vinny said, so much of it is seen through her lens. What were your thoughts on that technique that Nichols kind of decided to do with everything kind of going through Kathy's eyes.
I thought it was good because, like we're also being brought into this world. So Jodie is the outsider of everything basically. And she's trying to explain it to the reporter and the, documentary person with the, with the photographs of like what that meant and what the emotion she was going through. So she's explaining it to us just as she's explaining it to him. And I think that was a good way to walk us through the sequence of events. So I did think that there were some points where they could have condensed like some of her interview sequences, just maybe because it was like small stuff. It was like, oh, and then we went to the car meet and then this happened. And like it wasn't all the pivotal stuff. It wasn't like, oh, this is when everything changed or like this. Like there was some of that, but there were other moments that were in between. I wish they focused more on the reasoning behind some of the major events. Like there was even the major event of the bar burning down, and I wish they elaborated more on that. And then the amount of violence that they were bringing to the town or the police, or like how were the police really viewing them. So but it was also, I understand why they didn't elaborate outside of the box, because it's not about all bikers, it's about these bikers. So I can understand that from Nichols' perspective. I just think it's like some of the marketing to maybe, like, I don't know, but I like her character walking us through that and the innocence that she brings to it. And I mean, her prep work for this movie was freaking flawless. It was unbelievable to be an English actor and have that perfect of an accent, and all the stuff that they've been talking about with her was phenomenal. But yeah, what do you think about it?
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, I don't really have much else to say that we haven't already said, or she blew me away throughout this entire film, and she has so many powerful moments too. I mean, I kind of already said a little bit of spoilers. Are we going into spoilers?
Yeah, we get here. Well, so for the rest of the, if you guys haven't seen this film, I would say we probably all at least recommend going to see it.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
You guys should go see this movie. If you guys haven't had a chance to see this movie yet, you can pause the review here, go see it. You can return back to this moment. We're going to go into spoilers. But if you have seen the movie and you want to hear our spoiler thoughts, we're going to go into spoilers now. Go ahead, man.
Yeah. So, the scene in the house where, they have all these new bikers coming into the club and she gets assaulted is such a powerful scene. And seeing her on the steps and like she says, "Where's Benny?" That like broke my heart, because it's like the person that you are looking for comfort just up and left. And you could see that, like, just the way she performs that is just so powerful, and just all throughout the film. She also has great moments of humor throughout the film as well, and that's why I think she just carries the entire narrative on her back. So yeah, she's awesome. I don't think I've seen her in anything either, but this makes me like want to go out and watch her older work and look out for whatever is to come in her career.
Yeah, she's definitely one of, like, I feel like the trending upward actresses in the industry. A lot, like she's on the top of a lot of calls. I know she was one of the finalists for Sue Storm in Fantastic Four, so I know, like, even in like the big budget realm, a lot of people want her. I think she was in Free Guy too. I haven't seen that movie. But I'm pretty sure she's the female lead in Free Guy.
She has a fun part in that.
But like, I've heard she's awesome. But I think the biggest thing, if I can highlight anything, is the biggest pro for this movie is definitely the acting. I think that it's really an acting showcase for pretty much everybody in the movie. Like, I personally, I don't think there's a bad performance, regardless of maybe Butler sort of not having as much to work with. I think he played his role well. Like, I
agree with that.
Yeah, I think that him playing, like I said, that mystique, there's so much like of an aura around his character that makes it feel like a classic movie star, which you don't have with a lot of people in the industry anymore. And I think he does a really great job with that. I was saying right before we started recording, it's been a long time since I've seen Tom Hardy do something that feels really gritty and really like Tom Hardy-esque. Because he's just been playing Venom for like 6 years. So I loved seeing him as Johnny in this, and then he has some really great moments. And I love how same as you, Zach, I love this era Like I love being able to see 60s and 70s kind of play out on
Yeah.
screen, especially if it's done well. And I
Mm.
think Nichols really puts you in that environment in a really strong way.
Mm. Yeah,
Mm.
I agree. You know, here's the thing. So, as much as I like Tom Hardy in the movie, there were parts where I feel like he had, like in the last couple movies of his performances, like the Al Capone movie, Lawless, and like Mad Max, even to a point, he's kind of like he results to like he's a good actor at doing subtlety and having, you know, not saying a lot but mostly with your eyes, and he's very menacing and intimidating. And but there were other points in this film that I just felt like he was mumbling and like he it wasn't as interesting. And then there were parts of his intimidation from the start where he has the whole knives and fists thing. I thought that was great. But then they almost threw his intimidation away when the plot turns and he's like, "Oh, you know, I can't be doing this anymore. I'm gonna leave." It just, and that to me, like for the plot at least, it felt almost lazy, I guess, because but I understand that there was a transition of the era. However, we didn't see that full chaotic transition of like guys overtaking the club. And like since he was the chief leader too for so long, and why weren't his men as loyal in like getting rid of these people? Like we didn't see them even try to attempt getting rid of a lot of them. So I felt like there were some contradictions in
You
a
didn't
way.
think that was explained in like to me I took it as like I think Kathy says it early on in the film where she's like none of these men had what Johnny had. Like none of these people wanted responsibility. And when
Mm.
it's in the beginning when she goes through like all the members of them and the only one that wants responsibility is Cockroach,
Yeah.
and then he gets jumped because of that
Right.
because he wants to be a motorcycle cop. So
Yeah.
I don't know. To me that was explained through dialogue, but
It was more of like, you know, if he wanted to like like obviously there weren't men that wanted that responsibility but not standing by him to like weed out the scrappy people, I
Mhm.
guess. Like I get the community expanded to different branches and like it was out of their range of sight, but it was just kind of like they gave up in the film, and that was kind of like off-putting to me. And then there was one thing with like, or two things with the whole house party scene.
Mm.
um Jody gets assaulted and Cockroach gets jumped, and these are all by their own people.
Yeah.
And I'm like, where was the repercussions for any of that? Like, there wasn't even a knife fight for that or anything of like, we're gonna find these guys who did this. And like Benny talked about doing it, but he never did. So that was like one thing. I'm like, they're talking about loyalty and dedication, and that those were two major events that nothing happened. They just let happen. So I there was just like that was off putting for me. But
Mm.
I don't know how you guys felt about some of that. Like I don't know.
Yeah, I honestly like that initial thought came to me when that scene happened of like, all right, so what happened to those guys? Because you know, um once Cockroach gets beat up and the scene with Jody happens, I did wonder the same thing. However, I feel like towards the end of the film, it kind of just like was out my brain, if you know what I
Mhm.
mean. But that is a good point that you bring up, and it does strike a little bit more thought and, in retrospect, a little bit a new perspective on the film that I wasn't considering.
Mhm.
You know.
yeah.
Maybe it's more like, just as I'm thinking about it too, maybe it's more of like Johnny was not always a man of his word, as he was saying, and because he's also like to Kathy early on, like, "Oh, I'll protect you from these guys. Like, don't worry about it. Like, I
Mm.
got your back," and that kind of thing. And he's always like, "I got Benny's back." And he did say the same thing to Brucey, like, or like he's had his bag. He showed up at his funeral, that kind of thing. And but the people, like his family, like Brucey's family, was like, "Why are you here?" You know,
Yeah,
like that
yeah.
kind of thing. Like, there's no, if you were this loyal or this protective, you wouldn't have let that happen, kind of thing. So there is that running theme through all of the film, and maybe it's maybe it is just like he's not a man of his word.
Well, Kathy has that too.
Yeah.
And you see that in her interactions with Johnny, where like she's like, Johnny always had our back. And it was always, and then it gets to a point where she's like, I need to talk to you. And then like she finally brings it to his attention. She's like, I don't want him riding anymore. Like Benny has a messed up foot. Like he literally can't even put weight on his foot. And now you want him to ride a motorcycle. And he's like, are you finished? Like, so it's so much more about his love for Benny as a person and the club as a whole. And that's what's reflecting. And of course, like Kathy is an extension of that through Benny. But I do think it's a good point to be made that there could have probably been more action rather than it being spoken through Kathy in that lens. I think that another part is that it might be reflecting how the chapters were just getting bigger and bigger, and it was becoming so much more of like an epidemic in America too. Like they were talking about how when it initially started, like this club started as like a racing club, like they were riding dirt bikes and motorcycles in the mudlands, and then 5 years later, there are rival motorcycle gangs, and it went from a place too where you even see it early on where I think. And again, they don't really give you they don't give you like, they only have a couple graphics where it shows you when the time period is, and it's over like a 7-year period. So you don't know when certain things are happening. They're not jumping back and forth. It's a progression, but you don't know when it's happening. But like that first fight scene that happens when they have the first picnic where there's a lot more love. It just seems like it's not as grimy and dirty. You know what I mean? And they have that fight with the rival gang, and then they all sit together and they're drinking. And and they go from that to... and I don't know if it's a picnic or it's a party, but it's another
car
gathering.
There was
with the same exact gang, like you said. It's just a different chapter, and this shit is happening. Like where,
Well, I was gonna say too, that was even another part of a contradiction that I noticed as well. Is like, also maybe this was orchestrated, so maybe this is going over my head a little bit, but also the car meet, nobody said. Like nothing technically threatening happened. They were just getting it in their faces. Austin Butler immediately jumps in and like decks the guy over nothing, technically, like that was said. But then when his wife is assaulted, he's not ready to go to war and like mess one of his own guys up. So maybe it was that undying loyalty to his creed, or it was a contradiction. So
I would personally feel that it's the former. Because of the fact that even the movie opens with him refusing to take off his colors.
Yeah. Okay.
And Kathy, remember Kathy even it's Mike Fight's character when he goes, why don't the guys wear their colors when they're not together? But he's the only one brave enough to do it. Only him and Johnny throughout the film are the only ones that are willing to wear their colors even if they're alone. And he did it because that's so much of who he is. His identity. And of course we probably, like you guys have been alluding to, we could have gotten more of that. We could have gotten more of an understanding of why his character was so attached to that ilk, right? But I feel that was so much. And he walks in, and I think it's Brucey that says to him, he goes, your boy's about to get into a scuffle or something.
Yeah.
And in his mind, he's the young kid, and he cares about the leader, and he's like, fuck this, I'm going to war for my crew. Without even, and then Johnny addresses that later when he talks to him. He's like, why were you doing something like that?
And I guess like, if it was a strategic choice, it was probably like how they frameworked Jodie still being an outsider, because she would ask the opposite of what Benny wanted for the crew, because like he always wanted to race, he wanted to get back on the bike, he wanted to be in the thick of it, and she was like, you can't be doing this. So maybe it was like just a rebellious side against her in a way of like, I'm not going to listen to you. Like, this is what I know. Like, I can't give up on that. So maybe it was that, but at the same time, it's like your wife got assaulted. So I was like, if anybody's going to kick the crap out of, so I thought it was going to be Johnny or Austin Butler to mess up those guys.
Yeah, I thought we were gonna get that even within that scene. Like I didn't think it was just gonna be him putting up against the wall and be like, it was a miscommunication, and then he walks away.
Yeah,
and that's the end of the scene.
Right, and then like from my understanding, it's even like, even though you are in the same gang, like that seems to me like one of the only rules of like, don't touch each other's guys. And their women and that kind of thing. So that was what I was like, dude, that's like rule number 1 or rule number 2 on their list of don't break that because something will happen. But and maybe that could have helped the chaotics. I don't know.
I can
it was just things I was noticing, and like I don't think it didn't like derail my interest in the film, or like I still love the film for so many different reasons. I was just like, oh, okay, why did they do that? And that wasn't really explained. And certain things just didn't have closure for me, I guess.
Yeah,
But
I think that's a fair point.
yeah.
Vinny, sorry, we were just going on a two-person
No,
rant.
no,
I don't
no.
know if there was anything else you wanted to add.
You're fine. I really don't have much else to add, honestly. Besides the fact that I agree. Now that we're like talking about it, I'm beginning to realize it more. And we mentioned it at the beginning of the review. I just wish there was almost a little bit more meat to certain sections of this film. Maybe it was budgetary. I don't know if it was even included in the script. Maybe they did have a scene that was cut or whatnot. But yeah, it does have you wishing that there was a little bit more meat at certain sections.
Yeah, give us like 10 more minutes.
Yeah,
I feel like the movie
yeah.
could have used probably maybe 10 more minutes. I
Yeah.
mean, and it comes in under 2 hours. The only other thing I hadn't got a chance to comment on that you had said earlier, Vinny, which I agree with, I think the movie's very entertaining. Like I think
Yeah.
almost anybody would have a good time with this movie.
Yeah.
For the fact that like you're getting these really off the wall characters and these good performances, and it's a very loose movie, and that might be why at times it kind of struggles with its plot, but at other times it succeeds, especially in humor. Like we haven't really talked about the humor, but there are some like really good comedic moments with these characters throughout the film.
Right.
And then there are certain characters where you get those deeper character moments, like Zipko when he's talking about wanting to go into the war, which I thought was a really good like added aside scene.
Yeah.
And I think again, like my personal perspective is like Jeff Nichols has worked with Michael Shannon for so long. I bet he was like, let's throw you something, because that was like another pretty powerful scene in a movie that doesn't have a lot of over the top emotional sort of moments. But yeah, that's pretty much it for me. I don't know if you have anything else either, Zach.
Yeah. Oh, there was one. So the ending, I did like the ending. However, I think there was like just one part I wish like was changed, because he goes to Florida with Jodie eventually, and after he comes back and Tom Hardy gets killed. Well, we didn't really talk about that either.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about that?
Well, I think it's just indicative of the time, right? It's such a reflection of, again, like at some point these guys, at the end of the day, regardless of how entertaining the movie is, they're showing the progression of a motorcycle gang, whether that's the good, the bad, or the ugly of all of it. And at some point, there's going to be repercussions for whatever it may be. And so much of what that identity of the club is, right, is that idea of you can challenge if you don't agree with what this person's saying, which I do think kind of plays into what I talked about earlier in the film, and my perspective of like how nobody is willing to do that. Right. Not even Benny is willing to step up to the plate, so to speak, because nobody wants that responsibility until this kid comes in, played by Toby Wallace, to try to sort of challenge. And that comes through an experience that he has personally with Johnny earlier on in the movie, which I alluded to before, where he's like willing to leave his friends just to join this gang, and Johnny's like, that's not what, like, these are your people.
Yeah,
like,
this is about loyalty, so
you
need to be involved with the loyal side of it, and if you were ready to give that up, then you're not part of us. Like, I love that part. That was a great test for the whole film, and then the just he instead continues on that power, like blood rage path of like, we need to send a message as this gang, because people don't accept us. We need to show them, we're going to force them to accept us by whatever means necessary, and fear us. Yes, which is the fear. Yeah, so exactly. And I, like with the whole challenging thing with knives or fists, or it feels like Viking stuff, or like, we're gonna challenge the chief, I'm gonna be chief now or whatever, and he's gonna take over, but he just blindly, cowardly, like, shoots him. So that was very telling. But then also his friends and the other like original people, they didn't know what to do. They didn't even get out of the car. I thought someone would get out of the car, but that was also what Nichols was trying to say, I think, too. So that
nobody was willing to step up to the plate, and they
the
one guy, what's the character? Because I have the IMDb page up. What's the character? Corky goes, what do we do? And he goes, like, this, there is nothing to do. Like, this is the next step now.
Well, that's true, because maybe it's like also a commentary. Same thing with like Brucey dying in a car accident, and they go to the funeral, and like the family is not happy to see him, even though these people have spent so much time with him. They're like, ashamed that they would do it. But like their loyalty and their their background and love for each other also is dependent on this club. Like at the end of the day, they're just a band of pirates, like all self-interested. So clearly
100%.
if they did, like Tom Hardy, their chief, has gotten killed, and after years and years of spending time with him, probably like some of them grew up with him, and they're not ready to like go die for him, then it's all hollow. Like that's, I think, what they're trying to say too, is like it's just following a banner blindly.
Yeah.
Like I think
all
that's
these
what it
and
is.
so much like
Yeah.
what Toby Wallace's character represents is that like lost as a youth and trying to find your own family in that way, and that's what the club represents at the end of the day. Like all these people, and Kathy talks about it where she says Johnny's different. He's got a family. Johnny's the only one that has a family. Like Brucey is a girlfriend, but like no kids. Like, you know what I mean? Like so much of that is representative through all of these guys. Like you see it in like Cal's kind of a rover, and then even Norman Reedus's character, who Vinny said before, like he just comes in from California and he's like, I'm just gonna ride with you guys because like, and then you jump from chapter to chapter. Like that's what biking culture was back in those days. Yeah, 100%. But I think the Viking and gladiator comparisons are definitely strong, like you had said.
It's just
as
like
well.
It's all blood sport at that point.
100%.
But oh yeah, so the ending. Just one more thing, the ending when he goes to Florida and she is talking to the photographer. Like we realize it's present day at that point, and he's in Florida with his cousin, the mechanic, in the backyard. And she looks out the window and he smiles. I mean, there was the audio cue of the choppers and stuff, but I almost wish that his smile like faded away, because he's happy on the road and he's not happy when he's like shackled at home to his wife, because that's not his commitment. His commitment was the road, but he knows like I had to give that up, but he just didn't want to.
Yeah.
So he's like, he's now this corralled, like just raging Mustang.
Yeah.
He finally got tied down. And I wish that his smile was not. I mean, maybe look, Nichols could have done everything, and I just didn't like stick with it.
Yeah.
Like it's probably all there. Maybe I'm just processing it. If I did a second watch, I'd probably absorb it a little bit more. But yeah. So
you wanted the rebel ending.
I wanted just the yeah, I guess. But also it's not for me, like it's what he wanted, like that's the end of the day. It's just how I'm interpreting it.
Yeah.
So that's probably part of it, like, and it's not a wrong decision. It's just it wasn't what I was expecting. So but you like movies like that too.
Yeah.
I want to see things that are different from what I'm expecting.
Vinny, you had anything else on the ending, and then we'll go to scores?
Yeah, I think that to kind of challenge that idea, I think that we as audiences kind of get what Nicholas is trying to say. So we almost don't need to see his smile fade away, because we hear the bikes and we kind of already know, like, okay, that's you know what I'm trying to say. Like,
you didn't need the visual cue alongside with the audio cue.
Yeah,
true.
Yeah. Other than that, though, I don't really have many thoughts. Maybe a brief shout out to Adam Stone as director of photography, because I thought the film looked beautiful. Shot on Kodak film, and it reminded me a lot of Iron Claw, where that was also shot on Kodak film, and it just really sets the visual look for the setting. And there's some great scenes and just some beautiful lighting. I love when Johnny and Benny are talking outside and they're just lit like from a lamplight, and just like half their face is like half the frame is just black, and you just see like half their face in the strong orange. I loved his work here, so shout out Adam Stone and shout out Norman Reedus, because he's a badass and I love him and I want to see him in more shit. He's always like, he's never really in anything, but when
except for anything Walking Dead.
But
any of the 17 Walking Dead spinoffs, you can see him on that.
Seriously.
But when he is in something like this, I'm like, I love
perfectly cast.
And it definitely was perfect casting. He was great in this movie. I agree. All right, so we'll go to scores. Like I said, overall, I really, really enjoyed this movie. A really big fan of Jeff Nichols' filmmaking style and just the kind of movies that he makes. Like I said, there's not a lot of filmmakers that are making these personal passion projects
yeah.
that much in Hollywood nowadays.
Mm.
And I love that he hasn't jumped to big budget because I don't want to see him do big budget. I want to see him stick to these smaller
Yeah.
sort of stories. This was one of my favorites of the year so far. But like I
Yeah.
said, it's not a perfect movie. I think Jodie Comer is definitely should be recognized with an Oscar nom based on what I've seen so far this year. I think she's a shoo-in based on what I've seen.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say the same for Butler, but I do think, like I said, there's something different about what he represents in this movie. In the case that, like, what I got out of it was, holy shit, this dude could lead anything. Like, that's how I felt.
That's
I was
true.
like, this guy has
Yeah,
the face to literally do anything he wants, and I would see anything that he's in because he has that sort of aura around him.
Yeah.
And I like Tom Hardy's performance in it, but I can understand his acting style is very unique. And
Yeah.
sometimes it doesn't come across the best on every single thing. But overall, I'm going to give the film an 8.5 out of 10.
Ooh,
So
nice.
that's going to be my score. Zach?
Nice. Yeah, I'm gonna kind of going off that too. I think that, like, with this movie, Butler proved that, like, he has the leading man capability. Like, he's been in, like, Elvis, but Elvis, we expected him to be the leading man, because it literally is titled Elvis.
Yeah,
He's
yeah.
playing Elvis. So he was just a shoo-in as a leading man. But this one, he had to earn that right, I think, a little bit. Also, acting with Jodie and Tom Hardy and an ensemble, so he had to, like, really pop off the screen of making his own identity for his case. And I agree, he like really showed his ability and his range more. And this was also with a character that wasn't fully developed compared to some of his other stuff as well. So good stuff there. Oscar season still up in the air with it, but I do think Jodie should get some recognition, and I'm gonna give it a 7.5, just for some of my like things on the plot and just the trajectory of the film. But still really appreciated the period, the makeup, the costumes, the photography was spectacular. Everything felt like I was literally living in the day and the life of the biker gang per the photo book that it was based off of. So it's really, like, at the very end, the comparisons were, like, perfect. Like,
Yeah.
it was amazing.
Yeah, stay for the
So-
credits because they show the actual
Yeah.
photos from the photo book. It's
Yeah.
really cool to see the comparisons. Vinny?
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with do a little bit of weird rating here. 7.8.
Okay.
Nice.
So you're in between the two.
I'm
Okay.
in between the two. Just because I was gonna give it a 7.5, same as you, Zach, but I did also just, for those extra little bit of
Yeah.
points, I just enjoyed the film a lot, to the point where it's like, yeah, it was fun.
Yeah.
It was fun. I just had a really fun time. I don't regret spending $15 at AMC to go see it. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we all highly recommend seeing this in a theater. Again, go support movie theaters. This is a movie that it's a really fun experience in the movie theater. And we hope you guys enjoyed our review. Please, if you guys can, you can like this video. Also, comment your thoughts below. If you have seen the Bikeriders, what was your thoughts? What were certain things that stood out to you that you really enjoyed, or some things that you thought didn't hit the mark completely? What about the performances? Again, do you guys agree that Jodie Comer might be in the Oscar contention for her role as Kathy in this film? But please let us know in the comments. We'd love to have a conversation with you guys. And if you can, please subscribe. We're on the road to 500 subscribers, where we have a bunch of other stuff on the channel for you guys, whether it's news updates in the industry, plus other reviews, all the big TV shows we're covering right now: House of the Dragon, The Acolyte, The Boys. We're going to be covering The Bear soon, as well as some upcoming films like Kinds of Kindness and A Quiet Place, the sequel for that as well. So please be sure to check those out. If you guys can also follow us on social media, we are at Cinema Wave Media and at _Culture Wave Media on Instagram, as well as at Cinema Wave Media on TikTok and Threads, and just Culture Wave on Facebook. Just signing off, I am Darian Scalamoni,
I'm Zach Miller.
And I'm Vinny Albano.
and we'll see you guys next time.
This is The Culture.